In the Fuzzy Memories podcast, we celebrate the good, the rad, and the fugly of the 80s and 90s.
We're three latchkey kids who made it out alive.
And in each episode, we break down all the culture that popped, 1 year at a time.
Whether it's the birth of legends...
I'm Lyme disease free today, and I have Whitney Houston and MTV to thank. Or audacious moves.
Imagine also the poor Golden Gate Bridge. You turn 75 and people have a party on you.
Yep. I don't want that.
Or even confusing PSAs.
And the stop, drop, and roll. I mean, I assumed
Yes.
as an adult I would catch on fire weekly.
All the time!
We've got a take that will make you laugh.
We've also got thoughts on all sorts of random phenomena and the most unmitigated of golf.
Why sharks can't be trusted, people can't be trusted, and rivers can't be trusted. It's collusion.
Of the highest degree.
Uh-huh.
You were counseling me to start my remarks with, first of all, bitch.
Everyone in that room would have snapped to attention.
It's going to be basically coffee lids, shark revenge, and then maybe like Matt Getz. God, we need to do something about him.
Join us every other Wednesday to celebrate the hits, the misses, and the misfits of the weirdest decades.
If I could tell my 14-year-old self from 1990 that I would be eating in a Cheesecake Factory in
Beverly Hills.
I'd be like, we did it. We did it, Joe.
We did it.
Listen and subscribe to Fuzzy Memories on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your favorite podcast platform.
Hello and welcome to Broads and Books. I'm Amy.
And I'm Erin, and this is a special Broads and Books bonus episode.
Erin, quarantine can't keep us down.
No, you're damn right it can't. We've been recording our weekly episodes via Zoom.
And as we've said, it's been fine. It's not as fun as normal.
No.
But we are pushing ahead because we want to provide the best of content to you listeners.
Yes. But then what we did this week was we added one of our favorite authors, and the conversation just became incredible.
It absolutely did. Today on the Broads Talk Books with, we've got Andrea Lawlor. I recommended Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl in episode 36.
We got Andrea on Zoom, and they lifted our damn spirits.
Really did. Andrea cracked us up and gave us incredible ideas for our next read. I went to Thrift Books immediately and bought way too many books, so I'll just let you know that. We also talked about secretly dirty classic books, our troubles with reading right now, the one book Andrea recommends everyone read, and the weird things that we all find ourselves doing during quarantine.
You can find all of the books that Andrea mentions in the show notes on your podcast player and our website. Just go ahead, add them to your TBR pile. A few more dozen is not going to hurt. It's fine.
Hurt. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. And now, here's our interview with Andrea Lawlor. When you were a kid, when you were a teenager, did you have favorite books that you kept returning to, that you really remember very well?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was a kid who mostly went to the library after school till my parents got off work. Mm-hmm. So I read a lot, and I'm an only child, so also there was a lot of reading, just a lot of being alone and reading. I was obsessed from a pretty early age with the Lawlor's Book of Greek Mythology, which is very beautiful illustrations and great stories. That's not particularly surprising. I was a kid who kept returning over and over to the same series of books, which I think a lot of people do. But the Dark is Rising series by Susan Cooper, the Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea books,
Yes.
The Tripod series by John Christopher, there were just like a lot of, I mean, I read the Narnia books, I read things like that, all of Madeline L'Engle, because she wrote like 30 books. So I like to get a writer and then read everything. I was a completist, which was of course a failed project as a child. I had this idea that I would just keep a list. I would read everything in the children's library in my town, and I would keep a list. And then at some point I was just working through the shelves, and I realized that they were getting new books. And then my mind exploded, and nothing has ever been okay since. It's fine. It's actually great. It's exciting. It is exciting. But yeah, I think that even as a kid, I read very quickly and poorly.
How so? What do you mean poorly?
Well, I think, if you read quickly, you're often reading poorly.
Well, that's true.
So I would read something quickly and then like immediately reread it. Or, like read the same series over, like every year I would read like the same series of books as a kid. And I think, they would often feel fresh because I had read them quite badly the first time, which I don't think is a problem. It was just like a way to read. I was certainly reading for escape. And I was also the type of kid who would take a large stack of books from the library and just read them all, return them, get another large stack.
Yes.
So yeah. I really always identified as a reader more than anything else, and still do.
Well, one of the things some of our listeners have brought up, and we talked about it a couple times, was that early in our reading lives, we encountered books that were supposed to be wonderful, or were supposed to be like the gateway into great reading, classics, usually they're called. And we explained classics that we struggled with and why we kind of set those aside in our reading lives. Is there any classics that you struggled with or said, yeah, that's not where I'm going?
Yeah.
Ours was Moby Dick.
I actually love Moby Dick. But when I was a kid, I actually often found myself reading things that were like sort of under the sign of classics because they were often secretly dirty.
Yes.
And I was like, this is great. Like all these adults think I'm like doing all this extra work or being so fancy, but really it's the dirty parts. And they're like, for instance, much dirtier than Judy Blume when you get into like Colette or D.H. Lawrence or whatever. So I was sort of like, I'll read this dusty old book on the shelf. You don't know what's in there. And the skimming really helped too. The reading quickly helped because you can find the dirty parts. But I will say that there's a number of books I've never read. There's some books I haven't read and I feel rightfully I feel ashamed. Like I am ashamed that I've never read any Austen or any of the Brontes. And I think that has to do with gendered ideas. I had a strong sense like in high school that those were like books for girls.
Yeah.
And with gender stuff going on, I think I was just sort of like pushing away from such things. I have now probably seen every adaptation from every country and every language of every Austen and every Bronte, finished and unfinished book. And I've seen them more than once, and that's down to my partner, who still is, I think, flabbergasted that I haven't read those books. And I will someday, but now it's sort of like the pressure.
To the movies, they're going to be different, and
I think they're probably amazing books. People I respect love them. There's a couple other books. There's a book. There's a big book. I was in high school, or maybe it was before I was in high school, but when I was in high school, people kept saying that I needed to read this Milan Kundera book, The Unbearable Lightness of Being.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that I am still waiting for the hype to die down. So eventually, maybe I'll read that, maybe not. A book I read a couple of pages of and threw across the room because I hated so much, and I will stand by it, is David Foster Wallace's Invisible Jest.
Infinite Jest?
I don't know. I read like maybe 1 to 2 pages, and I threw a brand new hardcover. I was working at NYU Press at the time. I was probably 26 years old. There was a brand new hardcover, and I threw it actually across the office, and I broke the spine of a brand new hardcover. I think that the dude bro who worked as an editorial assistant at that time, I think he might have cried. But I felt so good that I've never looked back. I've also never read any Pynchon.
Yeah, there's no need.
I'm
And
not
also
sorry
you
about
made a-
that.
Yeah, you made a dude bro cry. So that's really a life goal right there.
That's a.
That's a win.
Well, that's it.
I get out of bed like that.
Yeah. But thinking about, the books that you reread and then the books that you didn't like,
Yeah.
at around that age or maybe after, did you have books that turn that light on, like, this makes me want to write? Like, I want
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, so many.
Mm-hmm.
So many. Some really formative books for me were in terms of like, I want to write. Eileen Miles's Not Me, which came out probably 91 or 92, and I think I probably encountered right around the time it came out. That book completely infected me with language, and that single book changed my life entirely. Samuel Delaney's Stars in My Pocket, like Grains of Sand, is a book that does a turn that I hadn't encountered after the first chapter or the first section. I hadn't encountered it before. I was probably 18 when I read it. And it did give me a sense of like, in terms of structure, not content, this was something new that you could do with fiction. But in terms of content too, the idea of like, this like super intense queer, BDSM relationship in space also, I think, was inspiring. And Delaney's memoir, The Motion of Light and Water, gave me a sense of possibility of like what it might be like to live a life as a queer artist. So those books, but probably the single book that really gave me the sense of like, wait a minute, I actually maybe could do this, was Michelle T's The Passionate Mistakes and Intricate Corruption of One Girl in America. Michelle and I are the same age, like really exactly the same age. And I didn't know her at that point because it came out on Semiotext. It was her first book. Mm-hmm. And it does talk about how she's from Chelsea, Mass, which is this like really, working class mill town in New England. It's in Massachusetts, which is very similar to the town I grew up in Connecticut. When I read that book, because I liked Semiotext books, and I saw, a new book by Semiotext, it's queer. And I picked it up and I read it and I thought, oh my God. And what she was doing aesthetically too was completely beyond anything I'd seen. And I think to see somebody who had similar cultural references, both sort of like the private, kind of like growing up in this crappy New England, dead mill town, and then the kind of public queer aspects, that combination, and then sort of like writing in this kind of like more experimental vein that, I think it was probably under the sign of memoir at the time, but maybe you would think of it as autofiction. I don't even know how Michelle would talk about her work, but I remember walking down the street reading it on 7th Avenue, like when you would walk down the street and bump into people because you were carrying a book, not a phone. But I remember doing that and thinking, I could write a book. And it was like inspiration, and like maybe there was a tiny bit of competitiveness. But I was just like, all right, gauntlet thrown, Michelle T, whoever you are. And then later I got to meet her, and she's amazing, and she's totally like changed my life in infinite ways. She and Eileen Miles are like some of the most unbelievably supportive of other writers I've ever met.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So.
Well, we talked a little bit about, we're moving now into a little bit of your reading life now. So we, at the beginning, talked about how unrealistic our to-be-read piles are. Are there any that you could share right now that are on your to-be-read pile?
Oh, it's bad. There's a to-be-read pile next to my bed.
Are we seeing the ones behind you?
No, those are books that so most of my books, I have a small child, and most of my books I've moved them to my office at school. But now I can't go to my office at school. So I have only what I grabbed the last day I could be on campus, and what was sort of like, stuff for current classes. And then a couple of things that have come since, mostly, some review copies and stuff like that. But these are books I've either recently read or thinking about teaching. There's a pile next to my bed, but in terms of on a to-be-read pile that I'm really, it's so painful. Marlon James's book, where the heck is it? Black Leopard, Black Wolf.
Yeah.
I haven't read it feels like it was written for me, and I haven't read it, and it's just been sitting there taunting me. I don't know about you, I can't focus right now. I can't
I
read
was just
anything.
going to ask that because Aaron and I have talked multiple times about how we're struggling with reading right now.
Totally struggling. Part of it is just like so much reading for work on the screen. And then with my kid, it's wonderful. We're reading like 3 or 4 hours a day. We read out loud. My kid's not reading yet, or is learning to read, is starting to read. But we do a lot of reading. So I'm reading a lot of things that are not necessarily what I would choose, but they do fit in. But another thing on my to-be-read list that I'm dying to read, and this has been on my to-read list for like 2 years, Daisy Johnson's Everything Under. And then a poet, a writer I just adore and admire, Anna Maria Hong, sent me this book, 15 Dogs by Andrea Alexis.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
You know, you've mentioned a few already, but are there any books that are either available now or that are coming soon that have just really surprised you recently? Like you didn't know about the author, you didn't know the book.
Oh, well, yeah, I'll do that in a minute. But a book that I just finished reading by an author I knew, and I loved his first book. The author Carter Sickles has a book called The Prettiest Star, and it's coming out really, really soon. But the book is about this young gay guy who, goes home to his poor Midwestern town to essentially die of HIV-related complications in, the early 90s.
Oh, wow.
And it's devastating. So that was surprising and delightful. There's a great new memoir by my friend Cooper Lee Bombardier. It's called Pass with Care. And it's creative nonfiction, linked essays. It's on Daughter, Jennifer Baumgartner's new press. She used to be the ED of Feminist Press, and then she broke out with this great new press that does these like really cool kids books. And this is a lot to do with like coming of age as a trans man and Cooper's time in Provincetown and San Francisco and Arizona and all these different places. There's a book that's not that new, but I've been in the middle of it. But I've been in the middle of it for a while because I keep having to put it down. It's called Tentacle, and it's Rita, Indiana, and it is post-apocalyptic Santo Domingo. It's like Yoruba ritual, queer, trans, utopian. Great, super exciting so far. I'm like a quarter of the way in.
How many books do you think you read at once? You said you were in the middle.
It is bad. Well, because it's like the read.
Yeah, no,
I mean, if I'm reading like, if Sally Rooney would fucking finish her next book, please, Sally Rooney, if you can hear me. I can't take
totally
it anymore.
Yeah, she'll hear you.
But I would just read that at a time. There's some books it's like, okay, these books just take over your world.
Yeah.
And there's some books, and for me, I will say that almost all poetry and nonfiction into the category of I'm reading them at the same time as other things. And as well as more sort of experimental or innovative fiction or short stories. I'm rarely reading a book of short stories straight through. There's a great book of short stories called Salt Slow by Julia Armitage. And it's super weird and beautiful and dense and magic realist and queer. And I've been like parceling out the stories.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Or like Kimberly King Parsons, fantastic collection, Blacklight. I've been parceling out those stories. Like I've read Glow Hunters like 15 times. It came out like last year, but there's like 3 or 4 stories I haven't even read yet in that book. So, but if there's a really gripping novel, I will just go monogamous with it. There's a certain kind of like if there's like a social realist novel, or if there's a certain kind of science fiction and sometimes like a YA book, I can just sink in. Yeah. That is ultimately my preference. But I feel like my attention is always really diffuse and I'm always and this is a great problem. This isn't a problem, but my challenge is that I'm being asked to read lots of stuff, student work, my friends' work, collaborators' work I'm judging or evaluating for various categories, blurbing. Like, so it's like, it's like a really excellent perfect storm of teaching and editing and everything else that goes along with that. So it's great. I mean, I'm sure you guys are dealing with this all the time, but it's rare to be like, oh, I have nothing to do but sink into this one delicious novel.
Absolutely. And what we're so frustrated because this would ideally be that time.
But I mean, for who? Like,
yeah,
we're in a fucking global trauma.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally everyone on the planet is traumatized if they weren't already.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
We had The Expanse, you know, like one episode of The Expanse tonight for a couple of weeks. That helped. I mean, go to space on television. That's my feeling. And then hopefully, but you know, and then I hope the writers for The Expanse can keep writing. I hope all those guys are writing and reading.
Yeah.
Because I want them to get the next season out. Is that bad? It's like Sally Rooney, the writers for The Expanse, Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah, we got to listen.
I mean, order up, people.
Yeah.
Dang.
What are you doing? Get to work.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you said that you get some stuff, you know, that you blurb for friends or people that you know. Outside of that, how do you find book recommendations?
Oh, well, you know, actually, I'm one of those people who actually doesn't hate social media. I hate Twitter. It's too fast for me.
Yeah.
I can't deal with it. I'm not on it, and it's not for me. But I like Instagram because it's usually pretty pictures. So if I see a book cover over and over,
yes.
If I start seeing it over and over, then I pay attention to it. And then I see if it's people I know, and if it's people I actually know. Or, you know, sometimes if it's booksellers I know, because I follow a lot of booksellers and book reviewers, you know, and book podcast type people I follow on Instagram. So that's like a way, since, I mean, even before this, I'm not going in bookstores as much as I used to. Mm-hmm. So for me, I used to just find books by like going in bookstores and looking at them. And also reading reviews, which I think I read fewer reviews now. Mm-hmm. And I sort of follow more, you know, Instagram stuff. There are podcasts that I listen to. I only listen to book podcasts. Should I be embarrassed to say that? Maybe not to you. But to others, but to others, I think, you know, other people really, that's great. But it's like, for me, it's like, that would be the one thing that's news I could use. Mm-hmm. Friends, Facebook, again, it's like, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but friends are constantly, you know, people I really like on Facebook who I'm friends with are constantly doing things like, what are you reading right now? And then other people weigh in. And that's actually, I find tons of books that way.
That's so cool. It's organic that way. And you kind of trust maybe where
it feels nice. I don't know. I'm not judging it. I leave that to Twitter.
Yeah. Let
Twitter judge me.
Right. Exactly.
Aaron runs our Twitter account and I stay out of it. Like I don't
right?
either.
Yeah, that was the best way to describe it. It's so fast. By the time I see something and I have a thought, I'm like, oh, it's over. Okay, I don't know.
No. I mean, I took 15 years to finish a novel. Like, I can't be on Twitter. Right. You know what I mean? It's like, I'll get that. I'll subtweet that in 15 years. Watch out.
Give me some time. We'll come back on that one.
It's like, it's not like I don't know what it is. I know what it is.
Yeah.
But by the time I've mastered it to my own satisfaction, we won't have computers anymore. The internet's in everybody's heads.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
I know, it's so fucked.
Okay, so we recommended Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl.
Thank you for that.
Books. Yeah, love it. Love that book.
Very kind of you.
Do you, you know, you just said that it took you 15 years. Do you have any particular books in mind that kind of pushed you in the direction in which you wrote your novel? Do you have anything that particularly inspired you for that, do you think?
I've always been interested in queer books.
Mm-hmm.
From the time I was a kid, finding whatever I could find. One of the things that has always sort of inspired and interested me about queer writing especially is the sort of literary attention queer writers have historically paid to sex as a subject for investigation. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I wasn't like writing the novel for 15 years. I was, you know, like writing something, putting in a drawer for 4 years, coming back to it, writing in like little spurts while also going to graduate school and teaching full time, taking a year away from it for emotional problems or because, you know, my partner had our baby, whatever it was. Like it was all sort of like economics and this and that. I wasn't like sitting and writing every day straight through for 15 years. Who does that?
Right.
Proust.
Yeah.
But over the course of that time, of course, you know, I read a lot and those things changed me. I always read a lot of science fiction and fantasy. like Samuel Delany, of course, is a huge influence for me, a science fiction writer who writes about queer sex and really sorts of like boundary pushing in every direction. And his sort of willingness to do that shape what I thought was possible. But the writer John Rechy, his book City of Night and Numbers, especially Numbers. Recently for Center for Fiction, I was asked with a bunch of other queer writers to like pick a book that was sort of like in my, like that inspired my book, and like read a section of it and talk about it. And I went back to Numbers because I thought, well, this is in many ways the most obvious choice. It's about this guy who, Johnny Rico, he's like in town, and he's like over the course of 10 days, he's trying to figure out, he counts how many people he has sex with. And he's like keeping count, and it's a thing. And there's a little reference to it in Paul. And there's a little pastiche of Rechy's writing because it's very particular. And it's kind of like my love letter to John Rechy is like secretly in the book. But as I was rereading Numbers before this event, I was like, oh shit, I kind of rewrote that book. Like, like it really, there's so many of Rechy's concerns that were my concerns. And I didn't, it has nothing to do with shape-shifting, and it's just, but there's a lot in it that feels really like the quest and the compulsion and the sort of, and different, and curiosity and exploration and all these different kinds of things. So I think, John Rechy's Numbers is huge for me. As I said with Eileen Myles, I think Eileen Myles's work over the years, from Not Me, and then after I read Not Me, I actually was able to find earlier their very first books, Sappho's Boat and A Fresh Young Voice from the Plains. But also then, everything. Like there's not a book of Eileen's that I haven't read. And so that's a voice that's been with me for, 30 years. A really long time, like really in my head, in my syntax. When I read, I just want to be 1/10 as good as Eileen, it's sort of like Eileen's really the person who shaped me on a sentence level. And through that, through Eileen's writing, then like James Schuyler, Frank O'Hara, the New York School writers, and Eileen led me to writers like Dodie Bellamy and Kevin Killian, who I studied with in San Francisco.
Wow. So she was
Eileen and Michelle T and Samuel Delany really shaped my life. But there are other writers today who are doing stuff that I feel like I'm just like in such a, I feel so close to, like Garth Greenwell particularly. I feel so much kinship with his work. And the writer Paitim Stavachi, who wrote this book Crossing that came out last year, that's fantastic. And he also wrote this book, My Cat Yugoslavia, queer Albanian. He's awesome, really, really cool guy. Really, really interesting writer. And like other writers like Edouard Louis, the French writer, History of Violence and the End of Eddie. I love his work as well. And I mentioned Sally Rooney. I'm just gonna claim Sally Rooney as a queer writer. And say, Conversations with Friends is legitimately a queer book. And I will argue, and I keep threatening to write an essay about this, that Normal People is like a very gay book. Even though there's like not a gay in it. Except for the whole book is gay. I'll die on that hill. Anyway, all of which is to say, like, there are a lot of much younger writers writing today who I feel a lot of kinship with, because I think that they're interested in the way that sex shapes people's lives and the way class and sexual activity intertwine.
So at the end of each episode, we like to ask, or each time we talk to an author, kind of a top 5 list of questions. And the first one is, what is your most memorable fan interaction? Whether that's funny, weird, touching, we've had all kinds.
I embarrassed myself really badly by fanboying Susan Choi in the green room at the Austin Book Fair. And she was a little bit like, okay. And then I like kind of did it again at the Miami Book Fair. And then she was like, okay, I've seen you before. Like, you're not.
She has you on a list somewhere.
At that point, she was like, she was super nice. I am like obsessed with her writing. So I was like, I love you. Like, I had nothing interesting to say. That's my most recent fan experience. Susan Choi.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
You're on a list somewhere for sure.
I know, no, I totally am. Oh my God, it's
I'm
really...
not that person, Anne. Yeah. I think you talked a little bit about this, but who, in the writing community, people that you either looked up to or that you were just meeting, who did you get to meet that you were really excited about and it was great? It was everything you hoped it would be.
You know what's kind of weird is it's like almost every writer that I've ever really looked up to has been amazing. I haven't had those experiences where people have a shitty time with a writer. I mean, Samuel Delaney, he was such a hero to me. He was so important to me as a young person. And then when I got to not just meet him, but study with him at Temple in a graduate program, it was, 5 minutes in the hallway with him, you learn more about writing than 5 years in some other program. But he's also just a really loving and kind person. We did this queer and trans open mic. My colleague Samuel Ace, he's a poet. He and I do this at Mount Holyoke this year was our 4th annual open mic, and we usually do it at the art museum, and the students read and we get local queer and trans writers to come, and we get great people because we live in Western Mass and there's a lot of people here. But this year we had to do it on Zoom, and I just put this call out to just tons of queer, and Sam did too, just tons of queer and trans writer friends we knew, would you come? And I just was Samuel Delaney, he always used to say, when you're submitting work, submit to your top choice first and go down the list. But, if the New Yorker's your dream, submit to the New Yorker. Yeah. So I wrote to him as well as everybody else. I wrote to 30 people, and we had amazing people like Tori Peters and Kava Akbar, and a bunch of people said yes and came, and they read a little bit and they stayed, Kay Gabriel, and they listened to the students, and the students were blown away and totally moved. But we had that thing where you couldn't see everybody, you could just see the person reading and the hosts. Because there were 100 people there. Yeah. But we agreed at the end we would uninvisibilize everybody. We would show everybody, that's the word. We would reveal everybody. So there's this big reveal at the end. And Chip was there. Samuel Delaney came. And we were like, you want to read something? He's like, no, I just wanted to be together.
Oh, that's so cool.
I just want to come. And it's just that spirit of community.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. And I think it was extremely moving for my students, but it was so moving for us. We all just kind of died in a good way.
How would you say your love or joy of reading has changed since you became a published writer?
Well, when you see how the sausage is made, I mean, you all know how the sausage is made.
Changes, yeah.
You're all right. That person has a publicist. I think I worked in publishing out of college. I worked at Emily Press for a number of years in marketing. I was a bookseller at Dog-Eared Books in San Francisco and Robbins in Philly, and now Voyager and the Third Eye in Provincetown. I may have worked elsewhere too. I've worked in a number of bookstores. I've worked in publishing as a marketing person. I teach creative writing. So I'm a gatekeeper. I've been an editor at Fence for a number of years. Reluctantly or not, I'm seeing on the inside all of the ways that things become canonical or they become noticed or, and having a book that came out on a very small but mighty press, Rescue Press,
yes.
And seeing the way in which, but I came out in a small press world too. I did zines and then I did chapbooks. I had a little press called Pocket Myths that I did these retellings of mythology with other people in the early aughts. And so I've seen lots of different parts of publishing. This was when I got an agent after it had been out on Rescue for a year, and when my wonderful agent sold it reprint to Vintage, which then, Rescue gets half of that in perpetuity. So they get half the advance and half the royalties. It means that more obscure or innovative or, more poetry books get, Rescue does really, really good work and they make beautiful objects. And so I'm delighted that this has benefited them. And the people I've worked with at Vintage and at Picador in the UK have been phenomenal. Like, they've been really wonderful humans. And the whiting has been amazing, and working with everybody there, like learning about how all of that stuff works. There were things I didn't know about from being a bookseller or a teacher or working in university press publishing. It is startling to, like, what happened with American Dirt seems like totally obvious to me that would happen. It's like things are sort of ordained to be bestsellers.
To be the next thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think, and I think that does a disservice to everybody. Her advance could have been a modest advance for 200 writers.
Yeah.
Or more. I don't know. Like, the whole thing is insane, right? So all of that, like, not even getting into anything about the book, just getting into the economics of it. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And so I think that sort of way in which the inequities, the systemic injustice that we're already dealing with it's just embedded in publishing. But then you see it and you're sort of like, oh, why is this book that, now I'm not talking about American Dirt, I haven't read it, but why is this like totally fine book the best book?
Yeah.
And why is this actually genius book nowhere but on the like coffee tables of my MFA friends?
Yeah, it's very very frustrating. You have mentioned a ton of books in our talk so far that also
Sorry.
No, this is
I'm like that Portlandia skit. Read it.
Also, I mean, it's going to make our to be read piles even more unachievable, which is great.
Good, thanks. Sorry.
Don't apologize at all. Is there a book, either one that you've already talked about or one that you haven't, that you think everyone should read?
Oh, that's easy. Yeah, I do. There's one book I think everybody should read.
Yeah?
It's Ursula K. Le Guin's The Dispossessed.
Oh, wow.
There's no question in my mind. It's about this anarchist planet, Anaris, and there's this physicist, Shivak, who lives on this anarchist planet. And he is getting real far with the physics, and he's communicating with his archist planet, Uris, and the physicist there, and he gets a special dispensation to be able to go to the archist planet, and you get to see the anarchist planet and the archist planet, and it is the most profound vision of a different way to live that I've ever read. The anarchist planet is, there's a pandemic on the anarchist planet. It's a great thing to read right now. The anarchist planet is difficult. People disagree. There is conflict. Life is hard. People don't get to like do what they want. Like, you don't live with your kids. There's things about it that are like brutal. And it is a life-changing vision of what could be possible if people actually all took responsibility for our own lives.
Wow.
And if we just jumped in. And I literally tell, it's like an easy answer. I tell all my students, there's one book you ever read again in your life. This is the one book.
That's, Erin, I don't think we've talked to a number of authors, and everyone struggles with this question.
That was like the
you have
quickest
one ready to go. Yeah.
I love that.
I've given away so many copies of it, I love this book.
Fantastic.
Yeah, read it.
Okay, so that we end all of our episodes with our favorite current pop culture obsession. So is there anything right now you're watching, TV, movie, music, anything that you're like, this right now, this is it for me?
Well, I already mentioned that my partner and I have been watching The Expanse, although we're waiting desperately for the next season, and same with Star Trek Discovery. But she has certain limits. In terms of like what
she can do,
trashy shows she'll watch. So I just finished the 3rd season of Legacies by myself, and I will tell you that I've seen every episode of The Vampire Diaries, and I came about that honestly because I watched a couple episodes and I was like, this is maybe weirdly good, and then Kelly Link, the writer Kelly Link, was like, I'm obsessed with Vampire Diaries, and then I was like, oh, it's allowed.
Fully allowed.
8 seasons later. I'm not even kidding. I watched 4 seasons on book tour last year.
Oh my God.
Yeah, on planes. I was just like, oh, I'm in a taxi? No, I'm in Mystic Falls. No.
So Legacies is the spin-off.
Legacies is like the spin-off of the spin-off. The spin-off was the originals.
Oh.
I'm saving that for when I'm really desperate.
Okay.
But Legacies is like, it's a little bit annoying because it's like high school, so it's like Harry Potter or whatever, but it's like super queer.
Oh.
So I also have that, very typical thing where I'll just like watch anything with gay content. And we did just watch, I'll also say we just watched Normal People, which was really beautifully done. Unbelievable.
But that, knowing you loved the book. Did it?
Love the book, love the show.
Okay, so it was a good match. Great.
Loved
I was
it.
nervous. I loved the book too, and I've been nervous to watch it.
Don't be nervous, watch it. It's great.
Okay.
Tell me what you think.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't mind fighting with people. My best friend and housemate Jordy Rosenberg, we actually constantly fight about whether or not something is good. By good, it means like, he's like, listen to this like noise punk, and I'm like, listen to this The Shins.
There you go.
You know what I mean? So he's like, your taste is trash. I'm like, your taste is unlistenable.
It sounds like a fun, fantastic friendship.
Yeah, no, it's good. He's a wonderful human and writer. And people should read his book, Confessions of the Fox.
Yes, I did read that one.
So good, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the interplay with the footnotes and everything. It was fun. Yeah. It was
and very occupying for someone who is quarantined and able to read.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much. This was so fun.
This was a delight.
Excellent.
Are you also having the thing where you're just so happy to talk to anybody who doesn't live in your house? I love the people who live in my house so much. And I'm just like, hi, other person. Whew. Hello.
Erin and I have been talking about how we've been doing things that we don't recognize ourselves. Like suddenly Erin's been mushroom hunting, and suddenly
Awesome.
like things that we, nature and stuff.
Outside of my comfort zone for sure. Like a hike, that's not my normal. So.
Same. Oh my God, I'm an indoorsman. I do not.
Yeah, me too. And that sounded good.
Yeah.
I was like, things are going weird up here.
Yeah. But we planted a peach tree yesterday.
Whoa.
I know.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't do it. I just dug the hole.
That's part of the
Yeah.
But then I was just like so virtuous. I was like, I can do whatever I want. After our child goes to bed, I can just do whatever I want because I dug a hole.
I can watch magazines all I want.
I planted a peach tree, so.
Right?
That is pretty impressive, though.
I know, it was impressive. I mean, it's like very small.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Planted a peach.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Thank you for that.
In our minds, it was fully grown and already producing fruit.
I love that picture that you have. Really, thank you.
No, we really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
This has been a delight.
Yeah.
So nice.
All right.
Well, good luck with homeschooling, as you can.
And good luck with all of the many things you're doing. And I always love listening to
All
you
of
guys.
it.
So
Oh, thanks so much.
yeah.
So, Erin, that was our conversation with Andrea Lawlor.
It was a damn delight.
It was a damn delight. It was so fun.
It was.
And we, prior to this, we have only talked to authors via audio, but this time around, we talked to Andrea via Zoom, and it was so much fun.
It was. It really added something. I don't love the visual all the time. I think because of myself, but it was great to be able to see everyone and converse, and loved it.
Yes, and one thing Andrea kept doing was recommending a book and then showing us the book from the bookshelf next to the desk where Andrea was recording, which was great. I love the visual aids. It was terrific.
It was terrific. Yes, it was fantastic. I love seeing that little bit of insight.
Yes. And there was like a secret door behind Andrea that their partner kept coming in and out. So we got a little glimpse of quarantine life too.
Yes, we did. Yeah, I forgot about that. That was great.
Yes.
I loved the part when they were talking about reading classic, dusty library books because they might have dirty parts and just skipping to the dirty parts. Like, thank you for calling out what so many of us did.
Yes, we all searched for smut.
We were talking about the showing the books and the secret door. And if there's one way to just put yourself in my heart, it is showing me your TBR piles that are all over the house. That makes me feel so good.
Yeah. Andrea has TBR piles in the office, in work office, like multiple places. So it was very cool to know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very
I also
gratifying.
liked that Andrea readily admitted that they are struggling with reading right now, and that there shouldn't be shame about it. Andrea just said, like, we're all going through a global trauma. We got to get it out of our heads that we should be productive, that we should be reading more. Like, it's fine. Just watch TV.
Absolutely. And coming off the episode we did about talking about our own reading struggles, it was really nice to hear someone else say that they're in the same boat. Someone else that has immersed themselves so much in books and literature. And I'm sure they find a very nice connection to that in, everyday life. And I felt that that's really weird for me too. So I was really glad to hear that somebody else had that going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I liked towards the end of our interview, Andrea was absolutely gracious, of course, and such a fun, willing participant in everything. And then they admitted readily, like, it's just so nice to talk to people outside the house right now. Like, yeah, that's true. It's nice to
Exactly.
be another human, even if it's just via Zoom.
And then they said that they planted a peach tree.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, well, you win quarantine because I've done nothing to help move society forward.
Yeah, Andrea Lawlor wins quarantine. So that's done. That's decided.
One other thing that I think is that you and I often talk a lot ahead of time about if an author is going to enjoy us or enjoy our brand of humor or our brand of weirdness. And can I tell you that Andrea was perfect?
So perfect.
Yeah, so funny, so easy to talk to, so comfortable. It really felt like just a conversation. It was great.
Yeah. And it's true. I think you and I, maybe just because of who we are, we second guess ourselves sometimes. Just for our listeners' benefits, we're just reaching out to authors that we love and saying, hey, we would love to talk to you. Would you be interested? And here's what we do. So we're letting them know, kind of what our show's about and, how to listen and all that kind of stuff. So it shouldn't be a surprise that people are interested to join us if they like what they hear. But, we second guess ourselves and we think, oh, they're probably just trying to do us a solid and not, really enjoy us. But it was terrific. Andrea was so game, so fun.
Yeah, it really was. It felt very much like a conversation that you could have with a good friend.
Yeah.
That's what I felt like. So I guess now I'm just saying that they're my good friend.
Yeah, I think.
Because I'm sure that's not creepy.
So 2 things, Andrea Lawlor, we're coming for you. You're our friend, whether you want to be or not. And maybe even an honorary broad. I don't know. I mean, is that too much?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So,
no.
I mean, I hope they're not afraid of our enthusiasm and energy. But you know what? It doesn't matter. That's where we're at.
Exactly.
Yeah, we love you.
We brought it. This is all that you can ask for.
So we will be back next Wednesday with our regular weekly themed episodes. And in the meantime, you can head to our website, broadsandbooks.com, and check out all of those episodes and our bonus episodes.
If you subscribe now, you'll get them all direct to you. They'll just appear.
Magic. Yes.
Boom.
Happy reading.
I'm up again. Same night, another dream. Before trying this recording thing, I didn't remember much of anything of these dreams. I didn't remember much from any of the women. And one night of doing this, and it's broken things open. The dreams they're in me, and they're coming out of me, and...
Talk to me. I am not broken. I am the most whole, most real.
Cause their despair. I wait for the word. Witch. Look at the mad woman in her cage. She was a woman with holes inside her. That was the heaviest factor, the final evidence, the heart of the issue. Somehow, you understand this. You hear me. Wherever you are, whatever this is, you... This isn't a dream journal anymore. It's not. It's just fact. Because now this is some sort of record. What are these dreams? Maybe there's a better question. Who are these women? Weird Woman is a Broads and Books production. All 9 episodes are available January 10th. Listen and subscribe to Weird Woman on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your favorite podcast platform. That's WYRD Woman, wherever you listen to podcasts.